Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Taimur Jan. I'm a first semester SE student here in COMSATS University Wakand. My roll number is SP22BSE039, and today in this topic we will discuss about Khilafat Movement. So in detail we will discuss that when did Khilafat Movement started, reasons of Khilafat Movement, goal of Khilafat Movement, how did it evaluate, and what was the outcome, each and everything in clear perspective. So what is Khilafat movement? Khilafat movement, also known as Islamic movement or Caliphate movement, it was a socio-religious movement by the Muslims of subcontinent when the British divided the sacred Ottoman Empire, hence breaking the vow they made with the Muslims pre-war. So they made a vow with the Muslims pre-war that if they cooperate with them in the World War First, so the British government will not do any harm to the Ottoman Empire, which was a sacred empire of the Muslims at that time. The main reason was that the British Empire have divided most of the lands of the sacred Ottoman Empire between Europe's France, Greece, and Armenia was established. So when when Ottoman Empire lost the First World War, the British Empire tried to divide the lands of the Ottoman Empire in between their allies. So after all of those activities, the Ali brothers Maulana Muhammad Ali Johar and Maulana Shaukat Ali started a Khilafat movement in trying to defend the Ottoman Empire. So how is, as we discussed it, that when the British government pre-war had an agreement with the Muslims of subcontinent because they were going against the holiest empire of the Muslims. So they had an agreement with the Muslims that if they cooperate with them during the World War One, they will not do any harm to this. Hence, breaking the vow, they divided all the parts of the Ottoman Empire. So Khilafat movement started in 1919 because World War One ended, resulting in a loss for the Central Powers. The Allied powers decided to impose sanctions on Ottoman Empire and divide Ottoman empires between British allies. The main goal was that the Ottoman Empire should be kept intact and all the lands of it should be given back. So the Muslims here in the situation were trying to defend the vow that they made with the British government. So they were trying to say to the British government that they should kept intact and they should value the agreement they made with them pre-war. Control of the holy places will not be given to non-Muslims. So one of the major reasons was also that the control of Muslim places, Muslim holy places, were given to non-Muslims. Like the allies were all non-Muslims, so one of the most holiest places of Muslims, like the Palestine, Jerusalem, were given to France. So one of the major reasons was also that Muslim majority lands to be not given to anti-Muslim empires. Muslim majority lands should not be given to anti-Muslim empires, such as France were taking the lands, British took the lands of it, Greece took some lands. So they were trying to give. They were just trying to kept the Ottoman Empire intact. The Treaty of Sevres was a treaty signed in 1920 between the allies of World War I and the Ottoman Empire. So in this treaty it was decided that in the Treaty of Sevres it was decided that allies can occupy any part of Turkey at will. The new state of Armenia in the Treaty of Sevres was established. Places like Syria, Iraq, Jordan were separated from the Ottoman Empire. Muslims were not happy over this treaty and development in Turkey. So basically the Treaty of Sevres was one advantage taken by the Allied powers due to the weak situation of the Ottoman Empire. After the World War I, the Ottoman Empire was weakened, and they took advantage of that thing, and they forced them to try to sign an agreement and sign a treaty with them. Then they took places willingly from them. In December 1919, both the Khilafat Committee and the Congress held their meetings simultaneously at Amritsar. A delegation was prepared which was sent to England under the leadership of Maulana Muhammad Ali Johar to see the British Prime Minister, Cabinet member and members of Parliament. The leader of delegation addressed the House of Commons and saw the British Prime Minister Lloyd George, who paid no heed to the delegation's demand. So basically, the British Prime Minister, the members of cabinet, and the members of Parliament had no interest, and they didn't even listen to them that what they were trying to explain, and they were unsuccessful from day one because they had no interest in that. The delegation stayed at London for 8 months and won many hearts and sympathies of people in Britain delivering speeches. However, the delegation returned to India unsuccessful in October 1920. So, Non-Cooperation Movement 1920 by Mahatma Gandhi. So, boycott against the British. After the unsuccessful visit to England, the leaders of Khilafat movement realized the fact that the British were not in the mood to help them. So they realized it after the delegation's failed visit. So when the leaders of Khilafat movement announced the non-cooperation movement, the Congress extended its full support to the Khilafat movement. Many lawyers resigned from their jobs as boycotts of legislature and court, all as the legislature and court was under the government of British. So they were trying to boycott British. In a sense, all those highly educated young men who could have rose to a high government position bade farewell to their bright future and accepted ordinary jobs in private sector. So they were like in all sense they were trying to impose loneliness on the British government, and they were trying to boycott in every aspect. The vacuum created in government offices was joyful filled by the Hindus, while the Muslims government employees willingly accepted reservation for the sake of Muslim cause. So Hindus here took advantage of the situation. So Muslim resigned all of their important jobs, important posts that they were having. So Hindus willingly accept those, and once again Muslims was betrayed here. And Muslim took this starvation for the sake of the Muslim cause. Students boycotted schools and colleges, and parents took them out of the schools. So parents willingly took them out of schools, and they were trying to play with their futures. Boycotts by the Muslims, the non-cooperation movement was started, and it was launched in 1920 by Mahatma Gandhi. India revokes their cooperation from the British government with the aim of inducing the British to grant self-government. So basically, the Indians were trying to force British in a peaceful manner to give them a self-governance and leave the Indians for their own good. The movement aimed at resisting the British rule through non-violence. Activists refused to buy British goods, used only handicrafts, and picked liquor shops. The goal was to uphold Indian honor and integrity in a peaceful manner. Thousands of common citizens realized the cause, and it was the first large-scale movement in the history of Indian independence. 1922, Chorachori is a small village in Gorakhpur district of Uttar Pradesh. On February 5, 1922, the policemen fired at few demonstrators, in which they retaliated and burned the police station, resulting in several fatalities, including 22 policemen were dead. In that situation, Gandhiji had all through the movement emphasized on peace and non-violence. This incident deeply hurt him, and he called off the movement. However, British government do get the victim they wanted, and on March 10, 1922, he was arrested and sentenced to 6 years of imprisonment. A unique plan set up by the Muslim leaders. So these movements was launched against the aggressive policies of British government and for the restoration of Ottoman Empire. So this movement made the Muslims delusioned with the Khilafat movement due to the declaration of Hindus of India as Darul Harab. So they tried to call Muslims to boycott everything and try to force them to migrate to Afghanistan. A large number of Muslims migrated from Sindh and NWFP to Afghanistan. Although Qaeda was not in favor of that, so the Afghan authorities did not allow them to cross the border. After this tragic event, those who had advocated the Hijrat movement came to realize their mistake, which resulted in failure of a movement. 1924. In 1924, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk set up a government on a democratic basis in Turkey, abolishing the Khilafat system, which was the main goal of Khilafat movement. So he basically abolished a caliphate system, a kingdom system that was coming in Ottoman Empire, and he set up a democratic basis government. So that struck up the first and the main goal of Khilafat movement. So after that, Muslims of subcontinent paid no interest in that, because a government was set up in Turkey, and they seem to have lost interest, and they thought that there was no need of Khilafat movement going on. So it was, however, it was a failure. But this whole Khilafat movement had one big advantage to Muslims, that was that for the first time in such a large number, all the Muslims and India were on the same page and run such a long campaign for a long time, because it was around 6 years that the Khilafat movement stayed. So it was a major advantage for them, in a sense that it was a first time experience for them. Thank you so much for listening, and Allah Hafiz.